All right. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. The context for our session today is really focused around the fact that our partners are increasingly asking us about managing their costs more effectively, as well as looking for opportunities to improve their research portfolios. This could be for a range of different reasons, whether it's for accreditation, for revenue, for patient value and reputation. So Q-Centrix has heard this feedback. We've built a research network that we launched in Q4 last year. Really, the goal is to harness the power of our data platform and the breadth of our partner base to bring more sponsored research opportunities directly to our partners. So our goal, in keeping with sort of our campaign here, is to help our partners see it differently and eliminate a range of barriers that exist in the clinical research industry today, namely this huge disconnect and mismatch between the trials and then meeting patients with where they're actually being treated in a data-driven way. So we want you to help use your data sets to access these research opportunities that may not otherwise be presented. The platform goal is really to connect partners with these clinical research sponsors, ultimately streamlining trials and access, as well as data abstraction capabilities. So the Q-Centrix Research Network members are actually able to leverage the data that they have in partnership with Q-Centrix to generate meaningful revenue as a part of participating in these different study opportunities. So we'll talk a lot more about that today, along with all of our learnings so far. By way of background, Victor Wang, Senior Vice President of Data and Research at Q-Centrix. I've been with the business for about 2 years, really focused on taking our existing platform and expanding to help our hospital partners in different ways, namely in their research departments, but also increasingly starting to work with research sponsors, so bringing those opportunities to bear for our partner base. Background-wise, I come from the research world, primarily on the commercial research front, developing data sets and research studies on behalf of life sciences and drug development companies. Joining us today, we have Kate Sharon and Karen Schmidt, and I'll let them introduce themselves in that order.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Sharon. I'm the Director of Clinical Research here at Q-Centrix. I work really closely with Victor, helping our partners grow their research efforts and expand our research network. I am a nurse practitioner by training and have worked in clinical research in various capacities over the last 20 years. I'm really happy you're all here with us today.
And I'm Karen Schmidt. I'm the Vice President of our oncology market here at Q-Centrix. Lucky enough to work with our team here on the intersection of oncology and clinical research, and have been in this industry for about 20 years now.
Great. So let's dive into it. Kate, as part of your role leading research assessments within our broader enterprise assessment offering with our partners, you've gotten a real appreciation for the different types of challenges that our hospitals face in their research departments, from talking to them as well as launching sort of quantitative surveys around the types of challenges that they face. Could you maybe walk us through some of those?
Sure, Victor. We really have learned so much in our conversations with our partners through the assessments that you spoke of. And then just as they've walked us through their research programs as they exist today in various conversations, clinical data really is the most valuable asset, and we see it differently. We see it as data sets with infinite possibilities. The truth is that our hospitals sit on a mountain of registry data that can be used for lots of different purposes, and what we're seeing is that they're missing out on a lot of opportunities. Karen, what have you seen specifically with use of registry data and research in the oncology space?
Kate, you're absolutely right. There's a mountain of data out there, specifically in the cancer registry. Our partners sometimes don't even understand the depth and breadth of the fields that we collect for each patient. This registry actually collects information from diagnosis through treatment and follows their patients through their lifetime. So you can just imagine how much information is contained in this registry. And we really want to show our partners how to unlock that power, both in finding new clinical research opportunities, but also using it for strategy in order to put those strategies in place to grow their cancer programs and engage with their patient population.
It really is hard to see return on investment and get all of that information into one centralized place that's easy to use for research. The reality is that most of our hospitals don't have a single engine that's helping kind of collect, process and manage all of this data. The challenges are numerous. We've listed a couple of them here. But these disparate systems that are hard to navigate and don't talk to each other don't make research easy. Whether it's data collection and sponsor identification, that's really time consuming, and we don't always have the resources to put forward to that when we're in a hospital. Cross-departmental inefficiencies, we see that our quality departments and our research departments often are not sharing data. So there's a lot of overlap. We're going to talk more about that today. Being exposed to certain clinical trials, sponsors have a hard time too. They're not going to sit there and call 400 different hospitals to try to find the number of patients they need for a particular data set. So many of our partners miss out on certain trial opportunities. And we've heard increasing data security concerns. There have been data breaches reported more frequently in the media. And so our partners are increasingly concerned about protecting their data. It's these challenges that are resulting in underutilization of the existing data for research purposes. I think, Karen, you had seen other challenges as well when it comes to just understanding the data and how our oncology partners are managing that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, Kate. I think that there is a real misunderstanding in how the data can be utilized in a broader scope. And I really feel that Q-Centrix can unlock that power and really show our partners what they can utilize it for. As I said before, strategic planning is a new place for them to start leveraging the data and really unlocking that power. When we're looking at that human curation, it really does put a big picture together for your data. So it's a very timely for us to be talking about how then we can transfer that to leveraging it in clinical research also.
Yeah, I think what it all boils down to is that there is this mountain of data, but just not enough resources, whether it's staff or time or technology, to be able to use and structure all of that data. That's really where a partner like Q-Centrix can help.
Great discussion. Maybe to keep things lively here, we've teed up a survey that surfaces some of the key points around optimally using existing data. So we're going to give this a quick 30 seconds. But the question here is, how much overlap do you think there is between the registry data, so what we're talking about being captured in quality departments, and then research data, so the data that's needed for various studies or to perform feasibility assessments against these studies? Your options are less than 5%, 5 to 10%, 11 to 35%, and up to 80%.
Really interested to see what everyone says.
All right, probably biased the results based on the folks who are attending the webinar overall. But the right answer is up to 80%. So 48% of folks who responded got that right. Organically, we kind of came to this conclusion, just sort of doing some of the work that we're sort of doing day in and day out. Hospitals basically started asking us to help them produce data sets for their various purposes. Some of this was observational studies. Some of this would be sort of feasibility forms that were coming in from sponsors asking about the specific number of patients that present in a certain way. Or sending us sort of data requirements as part of phase 4 studies that they were being asked to participate in. So over time, we actually did a very exhaustive mapping of all of this content that we were seeing from our hospital partners relative to the registry capture that we do for them today. So this is true in oncology and cardiovascular and trauma, infection prevention, and all of the other verticals where we support our hospital partners. We saw that in general, 60 to 80% of what was already being abstracted or pulled out of these patient charts were already usable for these different purposes, whether that's directly taking that data and plugging it in as part of a research registry or a study, or leveraging that data to figure out what studies might actually work for any specific center. Karen, you and I recently were at ACE, in Nashville, the American Cancer Executive Conference, or the Association for Cancer Executives. And they talk quite a lot about this thematically for 2 days or so. Could you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting point is that there were several hospitals that were trying to put their clinical research departments and embed them in the actual treatments for those cancer patients. One of the reasons is that oftentimes clinical research is in the basement, right next to the cancer registry, and they're not involved in that patient care. And understanding how, when you're embedding the idea of bringing clinical research to the patients where they're at, and getting them out of the data collection, getting those coordinators out of data collection, really increase their clinical research up to 63% from the year previously, just by taking away that day-to-day clinical data capture and really placing them in the role of treatments.
Right. So that perspective shift really sort of allows people to think more strategically and kind of leverage the moving parts of what they're already capturing within the system, which is a really powerful idea. Kate, we've recently completed a number of these research abstraction, data preparation, clinical data management projects for our hospital partners and their research departments. What have been some of your observations about these types of projects overall?
I think really what we've seen overall is that hospitals can better leverage their existing data. We've got many examples of how the research network has helped them do this, whether it was one partner where we took the existing breast cancer registry data and appended a few items surrounding COVID and how that affected management and treatment for those patients, or another partner said yes to a cardiovascular study only to discover they didn't have the resources to abstract the data. So we're able to concurrently abstract the registry data along with those specific research data set items. Just adds efficiency to the process. But the story is the same at many hospitals. There's high demand for chart review and data abstraction services for multiple use cases, not just research. And there's a good amount of redundancy due to not using this existing data.
Makes sense. We're going to roll out another poll for you here. And the question is, does your organization have separate departments conducting clinical research data and research data sort of abstraction and chart review? So do you sort of maintain separate groups really focused on diving into that unstructured information? We'll give about 30 seconds or so here.
We need the Jeopardy music playing.
Yeah, so not surprisingly, we're seeing that 63% of folks who responded do in fact have multiple different groups responsible for collecting this data, conducting this data abstraction or chart review. This really jives with what we're hearing out in the market, that as hospitals come to us for support sometimes, it's oftentimes just sort of this additional capture, right? And so they're really stretched thin across, the staff that's doing this work is typically capable of doing a lot of different things. And so they're coming to us with these questions to ultimately think about how to free up more people's time to do other activities that might be more valuable, especially on the ground in person at hospitals. Whether this is finding patients or conducting direct patient care, enrolling patients into clinical trial, or overall just spending less time on that data preparation. This concept of sort of understanding what different groups are capturing and gaining those economies of scale can be quite powerful. So in particular, we see this quite a bit in oncology. So a lot of our partners are increasingly asking us about all of this biomarker data that exists in these molecular pathology documents and capturing it in a more robust way. There's clearly just a huge demand from our partners and from sponsors to normalize and structure this type of genetic information systematically across all of these different testing vendors and next generation sequencing vendors. Karen, in your role leading our oncology, can you touch on this a bit?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right that with the precision medicine really pushing us forward, everyone who wants to understand what those genetic markers are and how we're collecting that. And we get our partners asking us all the time, if I just had this one piece of information, it would make the chart complete and I could understand really what's going on with this patient. So a lot of times, as you mentioned, we're adding these fields as the CTR is in the case. They can actually pick this information up right from the documentation that's in the medical record. However, as we think about it, we really want to standardize that data so that you can start to see trends across those patient populations. So for example, if one physician comes to us and wants to see this particular genetic marker and another physician comes and wants to see it a different way, our role is to really say, let us standardize the data so that when we're collecting it, you can look at it and use it over and over again and not have to recreate the wheel every time someone wants a user-defined field. And so that's really what our role is as the partner, to help guide that standardization and normalization of the data that we don't normally collect.
Yeah, as being a technology vendor in addition to a services vendor, I think that that's been this really nice approach that we're able to offer. This ability to say, we're already in the chart anyway. We're routinely hearing that you're looking to capture a couple of more things. Why don't we just get that information while we're already in the chart and capture it within sort of a standard technology stack? Maybe a bit of a transition here. A lot of our partners are really struggling with their research requirements overall, as well as just being more data-driven in their decision-making around research and investments. Kate, could you speak to this a little bit, both around, broadly, but then also just around research accreditations?
Yeah, I think most of our partners struggle with expanding or implementing research that's going to help meet those accreditation requirements for the challenges, the reasons we've already detailed, but also because most EMRs just don't have tools to adequately support research, study feasibility. They don't provide good ways for identifying patients either pre-study to fill out those feasibility questionnaires, or once the study has started, there's nothing in our EMRs that really help us accurately identify potentially eligible patients. The research network can really assist there. We can make up for what EMRs lack and really help our partners with those research requirements for accreditation. Carrie?
Yeah, and I was gonna chime in and say a little bit about the oncology accreditation. For those of you out there that are familiar with that, the Commission on Cancer actually requires clinical trials to be put into place for each facility, and a percentage of their patient population needs to actually be in a clinical trial. And so on the slide here, the interesting thing is that there are many different types of clinical research that qualify for your Commission on Cancer accreditation. This is listed right in the standard book and really outlines all the different types of ways that you can engage your patient population in clinical research. And just kind of going back to how we're talking about patients, really, it's hard to find patients that are eligible for clinical research. When you open up the eligibility to these types of studies, whether they be, like Victor said, retrospective or prospective, I think that this gives you a great opportunity to start to leverage those potential dollars that can come in from those research studies.
Great, thanks, Karen.
Yeah.
Hey, we've had 8 hospitals join our research network now and are engaged in deeper dialogues on the topic with 30 other facilities. From your vantage point, I'm sort of working and standing up these relationships and sort of the infrastructure to support this. Why are hospitals signing up for this primarily?
I think for any organization that has an initiative to get more value from their data, this is part of the same conversation. So the research network is really helping our hospitals use their data for more than just the required reporting. We see interest across all service lines. Our members of our research network also appreciate that we're a member of the Smart IRB Reliance system. We've got top tier data security, so really addressing some of those other challenges. And really just helping them grow their research operations across multiple departments and multiple facilities within the system.
Yeah, and the cross intersection between cardio and oncology and research is really starting to come to light. And I think our partners see that value. And as they look at their cost centers and how they're spending their money, as you saw by that poll, so many of you have different areas that are spending money to collect data. This gives you the ability to kind of streamline that and also put the dollars where they really need to be to collect that information. Because we say all the time, a lot of times your oncology patients are also your heart patients. And they'll come back to you for orthopedics and on and on and on. And so their data is being collected across the hospital in many, many different registries.
Right, Karen, you talked about cost centers. Instead of being a cost center, this data we see as untapped potential for revenue streams, study recruitment support. The data, that we're curating is not just to check a box. They're assets that could be used for any number of things, whether it's research or operational improvement, clinical pathway decision-making. It just drives revenue in so many ways. Just participating in the research network brings funded opportunities. So it's a revenue stream just in and of itself right there. Our life science partners have some shared challenges. Victor, would you like to share with us what you've learned from our life science partners?
Yeah, so, the key to all of this is clinical research is a dual-sided problem, right? And so on one side, we have our hospitals and health system partners. And then on the other side, we have the sponsors, those folks that are conducting that research and funding all of these activities. So as we've increasingly started discussing with life sciences companies, they come to us wanting to better understand what's happening with patients or seeking specific patient populations. Their existing data partners or CROs, so clinical research organizations, are typically having a hard time making these studies possible. Whether it's interventional studies and sort of standing up hospitals that are able to actually find these patients, or retrospective, so conducting these types of chart review studies to go through information and pull out what actually happened to patients in standard of care. Q-Centrix has a pretty unique role in all of this. I think we really come at this from a hospital perspective. A lot of the industry has specifically focused on sort of life sciences as that end recipient of services. But by sort of changing our perspective and saying, hey, we support a lot of different hospitals, this is where the research is actually happening, and this is where things need to improve in order for these studies to go more efficiently. It's a really pretty powerful message. When you sort of think about the capabilities that we already have, the fact that we're already accessing this data, that we're doing it at scale across a lot of different hospitals, and that we have what we consider best-in-class data abstraction services, it really has put us in a very interesting position. So for instance, if a life sciences company comes to us and says, hey, we're looking for 300 patients with this specific criteria. It could be cancer, it could be cardiovascular, it could be a neurological disease. But they're specifically looking to understand, how did today's marketed therapies, so FDA-approved therapies, work? How are patients faring on these medications? What's really unique about us is across our research network, we're able to look at this data quickly, right? We're able to query across these different hospitals that have opted in. And then we're able to amass that sample size pretty quickly. What we're seeing is that our numbers are pretty unique in our ability to sort of find that number. And the depth of data that we have is really unique because of the ability to do that abstraction, right? We have patient stage and histology and disease severities, or if we don't have it, we also have the ability to quickly review charts to try and find those patients. And so in this example, Q-Centrix can then bring this opportunity to our research network partners and say, hey, you have 20 patients that fit the bill for this type of life sciences study. would you be okay with us taking those patients, abstracting their information further, aggregating, then de-identifying it? By the way, there's also payment associated with successful completion of that project. So we really view these opportunities as kind of a win-win, right? We're helping unlock the pace of research for these sponsors, but we're also unlocking a lot of the opportunity for our hospital partners. And by the way, we do the work relative to the abstraction itself. So we're not asking for hospitals to drum up more resources to sort of facilitate a lot of these types of studies. So maybe an overly tactical sort of description of everything that's happening here.
No, thanks for sharing that, Victor. I think we've got some questions that have come into the chat box here, so I will kick that off. I'm sure first in front of a lot of minds today is we are being asked, how do we go about joining the network and what does it cost? I will say for our partners, and we're going to provide contact information as part of the webinar, you can reach out to us. If you have your partner success advisor or any of the contacts here at Q-Centrix, you can reach out to any of us. But the most important part is it is free to join. We truly see this as an add-on to the services we're already providing to our partners. And again, just another way to get more quality from the data that we're already collecting. We have another great question. Why do we need to join the network if we already have a well-developed research department?
That's a great question. And I think honestly, as you described, Kate, this is just another layer of the onion that you can peel as far as getting your patients on the best therapies out there and really trying to engage in what is happening with these new treatment modalities for all of your patients. And I think it really just does, it's more additive than it is exclusive. And hopefully everyone understands the importance of clinical research. I think that it's a pay it forward sort of environment when you are asking patients to go on a clinical trial and they're really opening the door for better patient care moving forward.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I have heard concerns expressed. If we join your network, can we be in another network? Yeah, absolutely. We're not, as Karen pointed out, this is not an exclusive arrangement. We really do want to add. I think different programs bring different things to the table. The only other thing I would add to what Karen has shared is that, if we can take some things off of your plate, off of your coordinator's plates, help with identifying those patients, managing that data, really give them that time back to perform patient care and some of those more patient-facing duties. We think that is one of the greatest benefits. As someone who's been in that position doing that patient screening, I know how time-consuming that can be, and it's nice to have that time back. So we have another question. My facility has done trials before, but has never recruited a single patient. How is this different?
Maybe I'll jump in to that one. It's a great question. I think we boil it down maybe very simplistically into two buckets. One, we're pretty convinced that a lot of our hospital partners are just not taking on the right trials. We've done sort of retrospective scans to say, okay, we're looking at inclusion-exclusion criteria of a study where you committed to find 5 patients over a 2-year span. But then in looking at your registry data, we see that these are not necessarily patients that are presenting, at your facility. So you haven't actually done anything wrong. Probably the expectations just weren't aligned from the start. So we think one of the key pieces here is just being more data-driven and selective about what trials that you bring in and agree to run. And I use trials broadly to mean, whether this is retrospective chart review studies or it's an interventional study. And then I think the other piece really boils down to a lot of our hospital partners will bring in trials or studies, but not necessarily have the staff with the sort of headspace or just the hours in a week, frankly, to do the work itself. Whether this is screening for patients, conducting pre-screening, or filling out case report forms and doing data abstraction. all of that is quite time consuming. And so we think a big thing there is just being comfortable with this ability to augment your labor force, to bring in specialists from a third party to help support some of that work. And that's why we're really excited about the research network, right? Because I think what we're focused on is kind of both parts of this. We want to bring pre-vetted, data-driven studies to our hospital partners with realistic targets that they can achieve. And we want to supply the staff to help make that more successful overall.
Okay, super. We've got 2 more questions here. I'd say if anyone else has a question, be sure to put it in the chat. The next question is, what role do you envision artificial intelligence will take in data curation and study feasibility?
That is a great question, and we get asked that a lot. I think AI is obviously moving us closer to mining the data in the medical record, but there will never be a non-human component that can really understand what's happening. There's so much unstructured data still in our day-to-day lives that we're definitely going to need those subject matter experts that understand the disease process and understand the data that needs to be collected. And we have a team that really understands that patient care and that patient quality. And so we're definitely not going to see that go away anytime soon, I don't believe. Victor, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I've shared this with my colleagues before, but in talking to some sponsors, so these are major pharmaceutical companies, this topic does come up pretty often, right? This idea of like, well, we're in 2024. How is it that we still need human beings to go and review these charts and sort of pull out all this information that we need? Ultimately, I really liked what one of our customers said, which is that they believe that the future will include AI, large language models, natural language processing to support a lot of this work. But ultimately, when they think about placing these bets, they believe that a healthcare company that knows how to do the work and understands the nuances and sort of the contours of everything is going to be the company that's actually going to be able to unlock all of that and have the human in the loop model versus sort of this pure play tech approach. Right? Do you believe that a tech giant is going to come in and look at healthcare and be able to sort of solve this problem just because they sort of have the tech? And the answer is no, right? They believe that the healthcare companies that sort of understand the human-enabled workflows and can pragmatically and sort of over time bring index technology will be the most helpful.
Agreed. Okay, we have one last question here. How have you factored patient privacy and data security into your research network? I will say patient privacy and data security are always top of mind for Q-Centrix. When it comes to patient privacy, these data sets we're creating are de-identified data. We're very cautious about what's being shared where, and will always be that way. I think when it comes to data security, Victor, I'll let you speak to that. We were having this chat the other day.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is, we work with 1,200 hospitals and over a decade have been entrusted to work directly with sensitive patient data. So there's that, right? We sort of come from this background of really, really robust compliance and security. Relative to research, we have a couple things going for us here. A lot of, especially the chart review work, all PII is scrubbed, and we apply a technique called statistical de-identification. So what this means is sort of removing very obvious identifiers of the patients, but then also sort of going through from a population basis and basically without any doubt removing any type of information that could potentially be used in re-identification of that patient. And so that's actually vetted by sort of third-party statisticians and experts who can sort of provide that blanket assurance. So we have a really robust data engineering team and data science team that can enable a lot of that workflow. And I think Kate mentioned it earlier in our discussion too, we're also a member of Smart IRB. And so what this means is that for studies that are more interventional in nature that might require running through an IRB process, we've worked now directly with central IRBs. We've worked directly with hospital independent IRBs. We're also sort of a part of this network. That basically means that we're scrubbed in and we understand the nuances and approaches of patient-consented research or non-patient consented research, and sort of have the capabilities to enable all of that.
That was our last question.
Awesome. Well, I guess we'll wrap up here a little bit early and give everyone 20 minutes back. In general, if there are only a couple takeaways that you took from this session, what we're really trying to get across to the market is that registry data is so valuable as an asset. This is both for driving research, generating revenue, improving patient care, driving hospital strategy overall, just being more data-driven overall. As you can probably surmise from our discussion, there are a number of practical next steps that the Q-Centrix team can help you with, whether that's assessing your research department or assessing sort of your data overall from quality all the way through its various use cases. So do feel free to reach out. After all of this, again, we will have a post-webinar survey. Please do feel free to fill that out so that we have feedback around how we're doing and whether or not this content is useful for you. And we'll also send out a recording of the webinar afterwards as well, along with some additional content. I know that a number of you, even as signing up for this webinar, highlighted specific things that you wanted to touch on and discuss. So members of our team will reach out to you to discuss those things in a more specific way as well. So thanks again, everyone, for your valuable time today. Looking forward to connecting one-on-one at some point. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.